Welcome to Season 5 of Measure Twice, Cut Once. This whole season is an exploration into behind the scenes of not just quilting, but building a creative business that truly lights you up. As someone who's navigated the exciting and sometimes bumpy world of turning a passion into a profession, I'm excited to pull back the curtain and share my own experiences. Some episodes will be just me, diving deep into my personal journey, while others will feature guests who are also navigating the world of creative entrepreneurship. We'll explore the nitty-gritty of building a creative business, the lessons learned, and the unexpected challenges that come with transforming your craft into a thriving enterprise. And don't worry, I'm not leaving storytelling behind. Instead, I'll be weaving them into the conversations about what it takes to grow a business while staying true to your creative spirit. So whether you're dreaming of starting your own business or you just love hearing about creative entrepreneurship, this season is for you. My guest today is Sarah Becvar, all the way from England, and we are going to chat about her crafty business. Sarah has been creating machine embroidered textiles and also greeting cards for well over 20 years. Her technique, particularly on the greeting cards, is so unique and so original and so very beautiful. So I know you're going to want to give this a try as well. So listen all the way to the end. Sarah gives a mini course in this podcast so that you can try this for yourself. So let's welcome Sarah. Welcome, Sarah, to the studio.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I am such a longtime fan, and I found you, as I imagine many people have, on Instagram because of your cards. So let's maybe dive right in the middle, and then we'll go back to the beginning a little later. What are you doing right now with your card making / embroidery?
Wow. It's obviously spring at the moment. We're just coming into spring. And right now, everything, what some people's minds are the spring flowers that are going to be uplifting us all, I think, really to bring us out of our winter slumber and bring some joy into our lives. So at the moment, I'm currently stitching a lot of floral note cards. Now, I offer a collection of floral note cards, which are mainly inspired by the flowers that grow around my studio, the flowers that I come across on my daily country walks with my dogs, and also some garden flowers as well. A lot of my inspiration comes from wildflowers, but I do get inspiration, particularly in the summer months, by the dahlias in the gardens and so forth. So at the moment, I'm making a lot of spring cards. So daffodils, primroses, bluebells, although the bluebells aren't out yet, but we've got the shift that they're just about to form. And some of my customers are incredibly organized and incredibly forward thinking, and they're buying the Lily of the Valley card because they know that the birth flower for the month of May. So they're getting their orders in now. Funnily enough, I was actually just making some Christmas cards as well recently. Can you believe? I think it's probably the earliest time I've ever made some Christmas cards in the year, but one of my customers was particularly keen on getting some, so that I recently made some Christmas cards. But yes, so going back to my sort of everyday cards, the majority that I'm making at the moment are all the spring note cards. And I think they're wonderful and cover a broad range of occasions. For starters, they haven't got a specific occasion written on the card. So I actually write the name of the flower on the front of the card. Nothing is written inside. The inside is completely blank for people to add their own personal messages. But what I'm finding from my feedback is that people often frame the cards. So the cards are given as a gift, as well as wishing somebody well, or sentimental thoughts, or happy birthdays. They can cover a broad range of occasions. And it's really lovely to hear that these cards sit on people's mantelpieces for months because people like seeing the image on the front and they can't bear to throw it away. And that to me is really special.
For sure. And so maybe we should take a minute and describe for our listeners what you do. And this is, of course, what created the connection in my mind. I'm a free motion machine quilter. So I use the same movements that you do of hand and medium. Yours is a card, mine is fabric, right? And that kind of
Mhm.
free motion, almost embroidery. But describe the type of cards that you're making and how you do that.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'm sure your listeners will be well aware of what freehand embroidery is. Essentially, are in control of the fabric, or in my case, with my cards, I'm in control of the card, and we move that around freely to create the design. So with my cards, I sew directly onto the card blank itself. I don't attach the fabric to the card with any glue, because I find the residue of the glue comes off onto the needle and then eventually the thread breaks. It's incredibly frustrating. So what I'm doing is cutting these small pieces of fabric, and I suppose it's an applique technique. I'm holding the fabric in place with my fingers onto the card, and I'm stitching around the inside edge of the fabric, holding it down with my fingers whilst also holding the card down as well. There's quite a bit to think about when you sew your cards, because as you can imagine, when the needle is moving up and down, there's a lot of um, friction, and the card does tend to bounce around a bit. And to get a really lovely, fluid, straight line with your cards, you have to put a little bit of pressure onto that card with your fingers. So not only are your fingers holding the pieces of fabric, your fingers are also spread around the card to try and keep it down and hold it in place, and then move it around to create your design. So there's quite a lot to think about. And when I'm making my cards, before I even put the needle into the card, I lay the fabric pieces out onto the card blank so that I know exactly where I'm stitching, so that I know that the image is going to be centered in my card and in proportion. So I've got a little bit of space at the top and a little bit of space at the bottom, enough for me to write down the name of the flower or the occasion. And once I've laid put them into the correct placings, I then sew the first piece on. What I find is, whilst I'm sewing, I then move the fabric pieces away because of the vibrations that I was talking about earlier. Those little fabric pieces then start bouncing around all over the place. So I very quickly brush them away. But I know, in my mind, I know where I'm going to be stitching, because I know where I had that leaf placed, for example. So I know where I'm going to be heading and where I then stop to position the leaf, and then again hold the leaf down, hold the fabric down whilst I stitch around the inside.
Okay,
It there's
you did a great job of describing something that's intricate. It's really intricate. So you don't have a pattern at all, but you do pre-plan it a little bit so that you know where
I,
you're heading.
yes, I always pre-plan. So even before I cut the fabrics out, I start off with a sketch. And my sketches for my card are always very simple. It's simply just a line. There is no point in me spending time adding shading or even really color at this point. It purely just lines. And sometimes, so that I get the proportions exactly right, I'll draw the template of the cards. At the moment, my current range of cards is 15 centimeters square. So I'll draw that square within a sketchbook, and then I'll draw a little sketch of a violet, for example, within that boundary. So I know exactly how big my leaf or my petal's going to be. And from that point, I then select my fabrics. And now, choosing fabric for card making is quite important, because I believe that it's nice to see some of the design on the print of the fabric. It adds to the design of your finished piece. It adds a lovely element to it. So I always choose printed fabric that have got very tiny print. Some of them are multicolored, some of them are self-colored. It really depends on the type of flower that I want to create. So I select my fabric, and then I cut the petals or the leaves out of those fabric. And at this point, I don't really draw a template onto the fabric before I cut. I simply cut. And that's purely down to the fact that I have been cutting flowers and leaves for years and years, and I could probably do it with my eyes closed, although I've never tried to. First, I would cut the petals or the flower head out, and then I would cut the leaves out so that I've got my pieces and take them over to my sewing machine. And the process then starts with me sewing. When I create a brand new design, sometimes that process can take 4 or 5 attempts before I'm actually really happy with the finished piece. Sometimes, and very occasionally, I'd say I can create a piece just by sketching it and cutting it just the once, sewing it just the once, and then I'm really happy with it. But that happens fairly infrequently.
Honestly, that's quite encouraging because I've tried a couple of these myself since seeing you do it, and I wasn't thrilled necessarily with the results. And I'm thinking of a rose that I did that I tried 3 times. And what you're
Yes.
saying to me is 3 times isn't really enough, like to call that success or failure. You need to keep doing it and improve each time.
Absolutely. And it's with anything new, any technique that you do, it's going to take you a while to get into it, to feel comfortable doing it, to feel confident in the technique. It really is a case of keep practicing. And I say this to my students who I teach, who come to my workshops, that you're not just suddenly going to get it. It takes a lot of practice. And there's a lot to think about. Not only are you holding the card down, keeping it nice and still, you're moving it. And particularly, I find those people who are regular machine sewers, and regular as in they stitch straight line, and they might be making their patchwork quilts or whatever, their brain is telling them, you can't, it's wrong to move that fabric in a circle. What are you doing? And their hands are going all over the place, and their brain is saying, no, stop, you can't do it like that. So it does take a while sometimes for the more experienced machine sewers to adjust to that freedom of you can actually sew in whatever direction you want. So it's always a case of perseverance and stick with it, and eventually it will just come. And with any design, new design that anybody is creating, you do go through a few kind of practice versions. You don't just suddenly create a finished piece. Very rarely would you, but the majority of the time you do have to go through this process, and it is a creative process. And it's a positive one as well. You mustn't look at things negatively or the fact that it's taking such a long time, because throughout all of that process, you're learning from it. You're learning, oh, actually, I think my leaves need to be a bit smaller, or I need to think more about the composition. And that comes through this process, however long it'll be. You can't hurry these things either. You can't put pressure on yourself to.
It's so true. It is a creative art, and it matters that you give yourself time to process and to play, I feel like.
Absolutely.
You alluded to the fact that you hold workshops, and again, I've seen photos of these too. I'm totally jealous because, of course, I live way across the pond. But you hold workshops in your studio, right? Sort of amidst your garden.
I do, yes. Yes, I do. I'm very fortunate to have quite a large studio, and I can hold up to 7 or 8 people within my studio here, which is in my home garden. And I offer 2 types of workshops. I offer a shorter morning session, but within that session, we can complete a single project from start to finish. And I also offer full-day workshops. Now, my full-day workshops are held in the summer, and these days are absolutely wonderful. They're almost like a kind of a short retreat, or some people have called them a spa day, because they spend the whole day being creative. And over the summer, and I'm touching wood that we do have a lovely summer, that the weather's nice, the flowers are out in front of the studio, and we can actually sit outside and have our lunch, and we can talk about our current creative projects. And then come back in and come to work. And within that full day, we can complete up to 2 projects, again, from start to finish. So it just allows people to just get fully immersed in their creativity on the machine. And that's all I ever really want. With my workshop, I'm really I hope to encourage people and hope to inspire people just to be a little bit more creative on their machines. I mentioned the people that just generally make clothes or soft furnishings and have never even considered the fact that their feed dog on the machine can lower and they can actually sew in many different directions. So I'm hoping that the workshops encourage people to explore more creativity on their machines and just produce so much more creative work. Freehand machine embroidery you can add to anything. As you yourself know with your beautiful quilt, that's the lovely one that's behind you. I presume that's yours.
It is.
And it can be on clothing, it can be on bags. I make bookmarks, I make aprons with the freehand machine embroidered flower on the front. There's so many ways that you can incorporate freehand machine embroidery into a project. And generally, everybody who leaves at the end of the day or the end of the morning session is confident to continue that technique at home. And that's what it's all about, really. That's what I want to do, to make sure people are confident in continuing this in their own time.
Perfect. You know how I'm always raving about bamboo batting in my quilts? Well, I found something that brings that same incredible softness to your entire sleep experience. Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet set. As a quilter, I'm pretty picky about the feel of fabric, and these are honestly the most luxurious sheets I've ever slept on. They're breathable, silky smooth, and they feel amazing against your skin, and they get softer and softer with every wash. Great days, after all, start with better nights, and better nights start with Cozy Earth Sleep Essentials. Not sure if you'll love them? Take 100 nights to decide with a sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Visit cozyearth.com and use my exclusive code MEASURE, that's MEASURE, for 40% off your entire order. Prioritize your sleep, prioritize you. Your creativity will thank you tomorrow. So I'm curious, as a quilt maker, when I go to retreats or sit down and chat with friends, one of our jokes often is around how small of scraps do you keep? So my question is, what do you do with fabric that gives you these scraps, or do you acquire fabric just for the embroidery that you do, and how tiny of scraps do you hang on to?
It's interesting. Over the years, and particularly through people I've met on Instagram, I get messages saying, I've got a big bag of scraps. I've got a bag of Liberty fabrics. Do you want them? And I always say, yes, please. I can use the scraps. Now, I've got cards here, but for the benefit of your listeners, these pieces are, I don't know, maybe 1 centimetre or 2 centimetres long. They can be very tiny. And I'll just show this card up to the screen, Susan. Or are we there? Can you see?
There you go. Now I can see it.
The daffodil there is really tiny. So you certainly have to watch your fingers when you sew. The pieces are very small. But I have had pieces of fabric that I've had sitting in my cupboard for years. And that's probably because I bought a meter of the fabric. And because I'm using such tiny amounts of it, it just lasts such a long time. But I never throw anything away, and particularly with card making, it's a fantastic way of using up all those tiny scraps that you just can't bear to throw away.
Good to the last drop, as the old coffee commercial used to say. You know,
Absolutely.
it's just, you can use every little tiny piece of that fabric that you loved so much. I'm curious too about your lettering, which is beautiful on your cards. Is that just your natural handwriting, or did you actually make that a focal point? You went and learned hand lettering in some way?
No, it is simply my handwriting.
I love that.
And
It so suits your
you.
style. It's just, it's soft. It's a little bit whimsical. It so suits the style of cards and embroidery that you do.
Thank you. That's really kind. And again, I think because I use pencil. I don't ever use a pen. In my eyes, I think a pen is a little bit too harsh. The cards themselves are sophisticated, and the writing, I think, needs to not overpower that embroidery. So the pencil allows the writing just to be a little bit more subtle and hopefully sophisticated. I dread to think how many times I've written the word happy birthday, but it must be hundreds of books.
Oh
I would be
my.
quite interested to find out, but of course I can't now. I've been running my business for 20 years now, so it's actually 24 years. There's a lot of
Wow.
happy birthdays that I've written.
So that's not a question I had thought of, but I now am. Like, how many cards do you think you make in a calendar year? And I know you embroider other things too, but let's just count the cards for a moment.
Do
Any
you know what?
idea?
I had absolutely no idea. Funnily enough, I had an enormous amount of Christmas card orders just this Christmas gone, and I was absolutely rushed off my feet. I got everything done. I wasn't stressed. It was all, I kept my cool, everything. I stayed on top of things basically, and I kept the pile of orders because I thought, wow, I've had such a fantastic season. I'm just going to pile the orders up. Once I pack them all up and posted them, put a tick through the order, and I'm going to leave them piled up on my desk to remind myself of what I've achieved. And a little part of me wants to sit and count all the cards that I made just for that season. But to be perfectly honest, I've not actually find to do it.
You're so busy making cards, right?
I'm so busy making. That's it. And working for yourself. Gosh, the list is endless of all the jobs that you have to do. And counting the number of cards that I made over the Christmas period, I'm afraid is bottomless.
I understand that, and I understand that. So I'm wondering, again, because I live in North America, you're in England. My question, is there an opportunity for folks like me who'd like to learn more, who'd love to attend your workshop, but can't physically come to one? Do you do anything that's virtual or online, or do you offer Zoom-style presentations or anything like that for those who are much further away?
It's really lovely that you are, because I'm actually about to launch some live Zoom tutorial.
Sign me up, please.
Yeah, top of the list. I get so many questions from people all over the world through my Instagram account, which I find so lovely. The fact that I'm reaching out or able to reach out to so many people, and so many people are interested in this technique and want to learn more. And yes, I offer my studio workshops, but I totally appreciate that people are interested, like yourself, that you just can't hop on a plane and join me for a day, particularly with your sewing machine.
It does
So,
bring up the cost of a greeting card quite a bit.
yes, it does a little bit, doesn't it? Offering something online is just the next step forward for me, and will open the door to my teaching and people's awareness of the technique as well. So I'm really excited about that. I just have to get over the few sort of technical issues, and then I'll be well on my way. But I'm hoping they're going to be very soon.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. As we come to a close, I wonder if there is a small, and I'm springing this on you, but a small gem of wisdom that you could offer to someone who is just getting started at this. Like, I'll let you decide. What would you say to that beginner that would help them?
Goodness me. I think this probably, I'm going to repeat myself from the beginning of the conversation to basically say persevere and keep practicing, because you're not just suddenly going to get it. So I would just simply say, give yourself plenty of time and expect that there are going to be hiccups along the way. I think if we're prepared for things to go wrong, then it's easier to come through them. And talking about things that could go wrong, I think the most common issues, certainly that I experience with my workshop, are tension issues on the sewing machine, red breakages as well, and then the direction, how they're going to move that card around. So regarding the tension, I would always recommend people just to loosen their tension slightly, because if you're thinking about you are moving the fabric or the card and the needle is going down, and you're putting a bit more pressure on that needle and that thread, just easing the tension slightly will help, and you should experience less breakages from that. I would recommend using a nice sharp needle. Now, when you're sewing on card, I actually use a size 70. It might seem a little on the slender, delicate side, but it leaves a very small hole in the card. Obviously, if you increase the needle size, you're going to increase the hole that's made in the card. And I do like things to be a little delicate, and the 70 needle works really well. Thread, I would recommend a good quality thread, because again, you might be putting a little bit more pressure on it. I use Gutermann sewall thread. I highly recommend them. I would avoid the cheaper thread because they will just fray and break, and it can be very frustrating. And you want to limit those problems. You don't want to be frustrated because you'll end up walking away and never going back to it. So make your life as simple as possible to begin with, and try and use a good quality thread. Regarding fabrics, if you're sewing fabrics onto cards, I wouldn't use a very fine fabric, and I wouldn't recommend a very heavy fabric. I would find a cotton poly mix, or just a cotton, just a dress fabric weight, nothing too heavy, and so that there's not too much added pressure onto the needle or the thread as well. And weight of cards, that's another thing to consider. At the moment, I would recommend about a 250-gram card, weighting card. You don't want anything that's too thin or flimsy because you could end up bending it when you move it, and the card could then rip. Also, when you're sewing on your card, just sew over one line twice.
So in other words,
Because
don't go back and forth over your stitching,
go
or
back and
you
forth.
perforate it.
What tends to happen, what will happen is the card will eventually split, and you don't want that. So you've got to treat the card very delicately. So you can sew fabric onto your card with quite a few stitches, but once you sew directly onto the card itself without the fabric, you're only limited to really just sewing one line or back on itself once, never backwards and forward, because that card will just go not having it and split. Treat it carefully.
Thinking of perhaps a stem for a flower, right? That's where you'd be stitching on the card where no fabric
Yes.
perhaps is underneath it. Got it.
Exactly. And also not wanting everything to be so perfect. So I remember a while back, I put a reel on Instagram of me sewing a daffodil flower, and I happened to stitch over the edge of the fabric and then go back into the center of the flower. And a lady came to my workshop, and she saw that I had done that and said, "I'm so pleased I saw you stitch over the edge." Because then I realized that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't matter that you go over the edge. And you want it to look handmade. You want it to look like you have created it yourself. And if everything looked so perfect and exactly the same, I don't think people would believe perhaps that you've created it. You want it to be like your handwriting. Sometimes your letters can be a little bit larger than the next letter, and you just want it to look as natural as possible. And it doesn't matter at all if that means that you sew over the edge of the fabric. It's not a problem.
Well done, Sarah. You've packed a whole mini course of material into the last 5 minutes. That's really helpful.
Inspire people, and I hope that it encourages people just to give it a go.
I think so, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing with me. I'm curious on a personal level. I'm coming to the Birmingham Quilt Show this coming summer. Are you by chance going to be there?
Unfortunately not. No, I'm a little disappointed because I did submit some workshop ideas and subsequently found out just the other day that they hadn't actually received them. So I'm not going to be running any workshops there, unfortunately. But I am running a workshop at the Stitch Festival, which is coming up in a few weeks in London. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Lovely. Thank you so much for spending this half hour with it. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's been a pleasure.
We've been visiting with Sarah Becvar of Sarah Becvar Design. She does, and this is quoting from her Instagram bio, freehand machine embroidered textiles. But Sarah caught my eye because of her very creative greeting cards embellished with fabric and thread in a technique that's very much like free motion quilting. So of course this appealed to me. Same types of motions and movements and machine control. So I tell you what, If you are in need of a bright spot in your day, check out Sarah's feed. We've put links to her content and material in the show notes. Check that out. Scroll through her feed a little bit, give her a little love, and a thank you for all the wonderful tips that she shared with us today. And my friend, until next time, may your sorrows be patched and your joys be quilted.